Londoners were used to fog. It rolled in with the Thames, hugged the streets, and lingered like a moody guest. But in December 1952, the fog wasn't just thick, it was deadly. It began on a Friday morning. The sun rose, but barely. A yellow-gray mist drifted through the city like spilled ink. People didn't panic. After all, this was London. Fog was a familiar friend, or so they thought. By midday, visibility had dropped to a few feet. Buses stopped. Drivers abandoned cars in the street. Pedestrians shuffled like ghosts, arms outstretched, navigating by sound and smell. And the smell, it was foul. It's like coal smoke, engine oil, and damp decay. Animals were the first to struggle. Birds flew blindly into buildings. Cattle at the Smithfield market collapsed from asphyxiation. But still, life continued. People trudged to work. Shoppers wrapped scarves tighter and moved on. London's buildings vanished into the gloom. Street lamps cast little more than an eerie glow. Entire neighborhoods disappeared into the haze. Inside homes, windows rattled with cold. Families huddled near fireplaces, feeding the very problem that choked the sky. Coal smoke added layer after layer to the miasma. Hospitals noticed something strange. Elderly patients were wheezing more. Asthmatics gasped for air. The fog thickened by the hour. The city slowed, but no one yet guessed they were inside a disaster. The British government made no announcement, no warnings. It's just weather, they said. Just an unlucky inversion. But this was no ordinary fog. It had a name, one whispered later with dread. The Great Smog, and it would become the deadliest environmental disaster in UK history. At London's theaters, the show did not go on. Visibility inside was too poor. Audiences coughed instead of applauding. Schools closed. Trains halted mid-track. Ambulances couldn't find addresses. Many just stayed home, hoping it would blow over. But the fog was going nowhere. It clung to the city like it had unfinished business.
They say history repeats itself, but what about the parts we forgot? Welcome to Echoes of History, the channel where we dig up the dusty corners of the past to uncover the weird, the wild, and the wait, what? Stories they didn't teach you in school. Grab your curiosity, and maybe a cup of tea, because what you're about to hear might just change how you see the world.
Night fell, but you couldn't tell. Darkness blended with the haze into a single, suffocating curtain. Breathing became labor. Funeral homes ran out of coffins. Morgues overflowed. And yet news outlets remained quiet. The Met Office released only vague statements. Politicians dismissed it as weather. Science hadn't caught up with the truth. For decades, London had run on coal. Not clean coal, cheap, dirty stuff. Smoke-belching chimneys were just part of the skyline. But now the consequences were undeniable. This fog wasn't just natural mist. It was man-made and lethal. Some called it pea soup. Others called it the monster. Whatever the name, it was not leaving soon. Over 5 days, London choked. Life crawled, and death waited in the air. Still, officials didn't act. The city was on its own, and each breath could be the last. Journalists were slow to react. The public was confused. It felt like the city had been cursed by its own industry. On the fog's third day, nurses struggled to reach patients. Some arrived too late. Children died in their sleep. Taxis refused fares. Clergy performed funerals without ever seeing the casket. The dead were buried in silence and shadow. Nature had no escape either. Parks fell eerily still. Even pigeons vanished. From the steps of St. Paul's, London looked like a ghost town, a quiet city, wrapped in poison. And still, the fog lingered. Inside Parliament, murmurs began. Questions were asked half-heartedly. But no one took responsibility. Meanwhile, death tallied its toll in the margins. Not with bombs, but breath. The silent killer, unnoticed in its moment, but people would remember. The choking stillness. The yellow-black sky. And the question that loomed with every breath, was this just fog? Or had something far worse been unleashed? By the second day, the smog felt like a blanket soaked in ash. It didn't just touch the skin, sank into lungs, clothes, curtains, everything. Breathing became a conscious act. Children wheezed in their sleep. Parents whispered over bedsides, unsure if they should call a doctor or a priest. But the phones barely worked. Londoners used handkerchiefs as makeshift masks. Some soaked them in vinegar, others in whiskey. It made no difference. You could light a match and barely see the flame. The fog devoured light, muffled sound, and erased distance. It was as if the city had been swallowed by its own breath. People started collapsing in the street. Coughs turned into hacks, hacks into silence. Ambulances never arrived. In hospitals, nurses wore scarves indoors. They wrote death certificates faster than they could wash hands. And still, no one called it a crisis. Officials spoke in riddles. The government issued no health warnings. And the Met Office still labeled it a persistent fog event. But behind closed doors, panic was setting in. Ministers compared numbers. Whispers of mass casualties crept through the House of Commons. They had underestimated the smog, or worse, ignored it. The coal used by most homes had become a weapon, especially the low-grade stuff called nutty slack, cheap, dirty, and full of sulfur. It billowed toxins from 1,000 chimneys into the cold winter sky. Then it hit an atmospheric wall, a temperature inversion where warm air trapped cold air beneath. Nothing could rise. Everything stayed put. So, the smoke just sat there, mixing with fog, thickening, poisoning, a toxic soup stirred by no wind. London had become a gas chamber without walls. No one had planned an escape route. There were no gas masks, no evacuation orders. Horses dropped in the streets. Emergency workers could barely see their own feet. Some walked with ropes tied to buildings so they wouldn't get lost. Stories started to spread. One man fell into the Thames because he couldn't see the edge of the dock. A bus drove into a wall at walking speed because the driver didn't realize he was turning. In cinemas, people began coughing violently mid-film. Projectionists gave up. The screens were just gray mirrors. Schools remained shut. Milk delivery stopped, and still, no official emergency was declared. The press caught on late. Headlines remained common till the morgues began overflowing. Then the tone changed. Medical examiners couldn't keep up. Some performed 10 autopsies a day. Acute bronchitis, they wrote, again and again. But the true killer wasn't illness, it was the air itself. Poisonous particles, sulfur dioxide, soot, and smoke. Invisible ingredients with deadly consequences. And it wasn't just the vulnerable. Young adults, soldiers, pregnant women. All were affected. By the 4th day, London began to feel cursed. People stayed indoors, but indoors wasn't much safer. The smog seeped through cracks, through keyholes, under doors. It coated lungs like wet sand. It clung to everything. Survivors remember the smell most, sulfuric reek like matches and decay. It stayed in their hair for weeks. Deaths mounted. Some estimates suggest over 4,000 died during those 5 days. Many more in the weeks to follow, and yet no sirens, no speeches from Downing Street, no national mourning, only silence, and the sound of London choking. Volunteers formed walking parties to guide people to hospitals. Some doctors worked without sleep, hands blackened by coal residue. Churches held candlelight vigils. Families prayed for wind, for rain, for anything to move the sky. On the 5th day, a breeze finally arrived, like a hand brushing fog from a window. Slowly, London reappeared. Streets returned, so did buildings. The world regained its edges. But inside hospitals, the work had only just begun. It was over. But the city was changed, shaken, ashamed, and newly aware of its own fragility. They had survived a disaster no one saw coming. Not a bomb, not a war, just the air, just the breath of industry. When the skies cleared, London breathed again, but not without scars. In total, it's estimated that 12,000 people died as a result of the Great Smog, most from respiratory complications, many more left with damaged lungs and lives. But at first, there was denial. The British government downplayed the tragedy. Officials called it an exceptional weather event. There were no public inquiries, no speeches, no moments of silence. The dead were quietly buried, their stories mostly untold. But doctors weren't quiet. They saw the pattern, the identical lung failures, the blackened tissues. It wasn't weather, it was policy, it was pollution. Scientists gathered evidence. They measured sulfur levels, soot concentrations, the shocking spike in mortality. The data spoke clearly, even if politicians didn't. Activists stepped in. Environmentalists, journalists, and medical experts began to sound the alarm. We are poisoning ourselves, they warned, and pretending it's just fog. Over time, public pressure grew. The fog had shaken something loose in the British conscience. This wasn't a freak event. It was the result of unchecked coal burning. Slowly, change stirred in Parliament. Heated debates, committee meetings, cautious proposals, and then a turning point. The Clean Air Act of 1956. It was the first major. Environmental law in the UK. It banned the burning of smoky coal and designated smoke control areas. It introduced chimney regulations and cleaner fuel alternatives. But it wasn't just about smoke. It was about a shift in mindset. For the first time, the government admitted that the air could be dangerous. Cities began redesigning themselves. Industry was pushed away from residential areas. London's famous pea soup fogs gradually disappeared. By the 1970s, visible smog had become rare, but the memory lingered. Textbooks, in documentaries, in whispered stories from grandparents. And yet, the Clean Air Act didn't end the story. It was just the beginning, because new challenges replaced the old ones. Invisible pollutants, carbon emissions, diesel fumes. They don't form thick clouds, but they're still deadly, and often we forget they're even there. The Great Smog became a symbol, a haunting reminder that progress has a cost and that nature always keeps the receipts. That the air we share can also become the air that suffocates us. Some historians now call it Britain's worst environmental disaster, not because it was the most violent, but because it was preventable. The fog wasn't an accident of nature. It was a slow-building tragedy, a lesson ignored until it screamed. And even then, only some chose to listen. Today, air pollution continues to kill millions worldwide. From Delhi to Los Angeles, the smog has changed shape, but not its soul. It hides in plain sight, but London remembers. Every December, the city breathes a little deeper. Not just for the chill, but for the ghosts in the fog, for the horses that collapsed in the streets, the nurses who stitched masks from pillowcases, for the children who never made it to school again, and for the quiet heroes, the scientists, the campaigners who fought the invisible enemy, who proved that clean air is not a luxury, but a right, and that silence in the face of death is not policy, it's failure. The Great Smog changed more than the skyline. Changed how we see the world around us, not just through glass, but through breath. It was a moment when the city gasped and learned, too late, that what we can't see can still kill us. A tragic fog that peeled back the veil in pollution, on politics, on responsibility. The cloud lifted, but the echoes stayed, in courtrooms, classrooms, and clean air campaigns. So next time the sky looks oddly yellow, or the air feels heavy in your chest, remember London, 1952. And remember this, not all disasters explode. Some drift in quietly on the wings of everyday life. And the greatest threat isn't always what we fear, it's what we ignore, what we normalize, what we breathe. The fog came and went, but the warning remains, woven into the air itself. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the forgotten smog. If you enjoyed this story, give it a like and share it with a friend. And subscribe to Echoes of History for more strange, moving chapters from the past. From cursed tombs to phantom boys, from spies on beaches to clouds that kill, we explore the quiet mysteries that shaped our world. Till next time, breathe deep, stay curious, and remember, history always leaves a trace. Even in the air, especially in the air. This is Echoes of History, signing off.
That's it for today's Forgotten Tale. If this story made you raise an eyebrow, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that dusty little bell so you never miss another echo from the past. Drop it in the comments. We're always listening for new echoes. Got a weird bit of history you think we should cover? Until next time, keep your curiosity loud and your history weird. That's it for today's Forgotten Tale. If this story made you